Well, I'm Tim Eian from Minneapolis. I run a firm called T Studio. We started Passive House Architecture about a dozen years ago. And with my partner, Stefan Tanner, we worked on the first certified Passive House in North America. So we have quite the history with Passive House on the continent. And yeah, just over the years, we've had conversations on sharing that journey and the decade plus with the community. So more recently, we firmed that up with some good friends and colleagues and decided we were going to come out to the conference and create an opportunity for everybody to go back in time a little bit and look at what their expectations were at the outset, what their hopes were, and overlay that with how that story turned out over the last decade or so, and where everybody's thinking that the journey might be going within the next 5 to 10 years for them, for the movement, and for Passive House in general. Sure. So in 2005, my business partner, Stefan Tanner, was commissioned to do a Passive House project in northern Minnesota in climate zone 7, so a very cold climate, harsh climate zone. And while I wasn't part of that journey from the anecdotes and us sharing that information, I can tell that it was a real pioneer effort. There was very little infrastructure on both sides of the Atlantic for a Passive House, for cold climate, extreme cold climate application. So the challenge wasn't just to get a project like that designed and built, but also the certification, the modeling, to ensure that all the climate data is available, and even the people at the PHI weren't quite sure how it was going to behave in that circumstance. And so it became an exercise of working with them, working with some in-house engineers at the time on the modeling, and in a way probably advancing both the knowledge base within PHI, but also sort of starting the track for it here in the US with very different heating and cooling conditions. And Stefan at the time also made a lot of inroads with vendors. There was no product supply chain for really good windows, for heat recovery ventilation, for high performance insulation products and the like. And so he took a trip back when to Germany, Austria, Switzerland, made these connections, and ended up bringing whatever product was missing into the country. And that story continues until today, where he and his sons ended up founding a window company that supplies North America now, and also they have a small import firm that provides to the state specialty products that aren't readily available. So I think that was a really important point for the movement and for the standard. For me personally, the journey started a couple of years later. In 2008, I got my first Passive House commission, which ended up becoming the first certified Passive House in Wisconsin. And that really started with a client reading a New York Times article about Berthold Kaufmann's house, who was one of the people at the PHI, I believe, until today. And getting enamored with the concept of energy conservation and also comfort at that level, and literally calling me up out of the blue saying, this is what I want. I hear you're doing that, so you're going to do that for me. And there was really not much conversation after that. It's the dream commission where the client calls you and says, I just need one of those, and then you literally fall into it. Obviously, there were many more trials and tribulations, but that's how that project came to be. And actually, until to date, I would say that project is almost unmatched in our portfolio, not just because of the Passive House performance, but because it's green to a level and sustainable on a level that we haven't been able to match, on other projects at that level of detail. Never say never, but it was a unique client and circumstance. So in 2007, I believe, I already knew Stefan back then, and I knew about Passive House from having grown up in Germany, studied architecture there, practiced there for a little bit. And in about 2007, I felt that the firm that I was working at the time could do a little better in quantifying energy performance for their clients. And so I sought out the couple of people that were doing Passive House in North America and try to see, is there an opportunity to do training, to do certification here in North America. And was happy to hear that, about a dozen people or so were trying to put something like that together. There was interest. And subsequently in 2008, I forget what time of year, might have been earlier or mid-year, the first session for the first training course happened, where I showed up in Champaign-Urbana with about 30, 40 other people, a lot of seekers, people who were looking for a good answer to their specific quest. And we became sort of the initial inaugural Passive House class here in North America, ended up going back 2 more times to complete the course. And I believe there were maybe only 10 people or so who essentially graduated from that class and took the exam and passed the exam. But that was a really cool experience, and I'm connected with all of them, or most of them, I should say, until today. So we share a very particular bond. And back then, Passive House was very simple and easy to grasp in North America, because it was literally a dozen people you could keep in your phone book. And if you knew them, you knew Passive House in North America. And obviously, that's changed in a great way.